After 6 weeks, the Lions tour has finally come to an end. Andy Farrell's men secured a 2-1 series victory, but Joe Schmidt's side had the last word with a deserved victory in Sydney over the weekend in a game that was hampered, you might say, by a lightning delay during the second half. We saw the Lions relaxing on beanbag chairs. Finn Russell with his phone out. Australia at the whiteboard with Joe Schmidt. So maybe the priorities on Saturday were a little different. But on tonight's episode of The Left Wing, we are going to look back on the good and the bad from the last 6 weeks. Will Slattery here with you. Glad to be joined in studio by Luke Verstrael. Luke, hello, how are you?
I'm good, Will. Yeah, last show of the season. I don't mixed emotions on that. I've kind of enjoyed this season. It's been long, but it's been kind of intriguing nearly all the way. And I know it was a little bit of a damp squib in some respects on the weekend, but there's still lots of good talking points. I think, lots for the interested rugby supporter to, I think, get their head around and digest. So yeah, I think. I'm looking forward to the show.
The job for me was I'm going to be going on paternity leave imminently, and it was to get to the end of the Lions series for the baby to wait and let me watch all the Lions games, talk about all the Lions games. Now, as of tonight, once this podcast is live, he may arrive whenever he wants, and everything can go from there. But he's done his job thus far. Which
will there be Leinster /Irish jersey /Lions jersey on the baby initially? Will there be a rugby ball in the cot?
I don't know. Yeah, maybe there may be a rugby ball in the cot, so I can be a helicopter parent from the off. And, live my dream.
I had one. Yeah.
Vicariously live my dreams through my offspring.
I haven't forced that on my children yet.
Maybe drop a little microphone in there as well. You can follow my footsteps.
It's always better to play than talk.
You've done both, so you have the full experience.
That's why I know. I'm speaking from experience.
Also delighted to have with us one last time this season, Jonathan Bradley. Jonathan, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Provinces are already back in pre-season, so I don't know whether this is the end of the season or the start of the season, but good for one last discussion anyway.
Oh yeah, you probably have to go up covering Ulster in the near future, which is it seems like it's going to be a while since we're going to see them in action. But yeah, it's a long out pre-season. Guys,
didn't even feign enthusiasm for that, Will.
No. Well, yeah, as I said,
this could have made an effort, buddy.
This is the end. I tried to make an effort. That was me trying. I think the way I want to review this 6 week period, guys, is Rory O'Connor published a piece ranking the 18 Irish contributors, and we might use that as a jumping off point, go through them, and then we can kind of see where we go with that. But first, Luke, just a quick tidy up on Saturday. Australia 22, Lions 12. Series was over 2-0. There was a little bit of intrigue to see how it would all play out at the end. I mentioned the lightning delay in the introduction. It was kind of a life of its own, really. It was a very strange scenario. Australia deserved victors, managed the conditions a lot better. Another big Will Skelton performance. Got the sense that the Lions, certainly during the lightning delay, maybe had one eye on the end of the series. Like, what was your perspective on how kind of it all finished up?
Yeah, that probably feels a little bit accurate. I think when a few of the injuries they took the kind of wind out of the sails a little bit. Obviously, the line out, I just thought it kind of smacked of a performance that they, like a team that didn't need a win. Like, if you think about some of the line, and they struggled a little bit at line out at times. I thought they were. Now, Australia had a few good ones too. Like, I'm thinking about the one over the back to Skelton, but I just thought it was really high risk in the conditions. And I think a team that really needed a win might have taken a few or two and driven a few there, and maybe not tried to be as. I'm not going to say expansive, but they might have just played a little bit more sensibly. And that was my impression from the game. And I thought that was a little bit disappointing. I'm like, if you were going to play like that, I would have probably liked to have seen a Josh Van der Fleer in the team, or do you know what I mean? And that might have brought a bit of freshness. And I think this is the biggest ever kind of hindsight view that I'm sharing, or so with the benefit of hindsight, I'm sharing this view. I think they looked like they could have done with freshening up the team a little bit in a few key positions. Guys who'd had kind of fairly long seasons had played brilliantly so far. Like, I think Curry looked like he's a guy maybe who could have done with a freshening. Jack Morgan's a brilliant player. He could have definitely played a role. And just there was a few throughout the team that I kind of felt, maybe freshen things up just a little bit. Before the match, I would have said, okay, it's great, he's going for the killer, but they didn't play out like that, and it didn't look like they had a game plan to adjust for the conditions, which kind of tells me there was maybe. I'm not going to say there's a lack of urgency. That feels really harsh, but it just felt like they didn't adjust and play very sensibly. And I think that's probably a good way to, in my opinion, to assess how the Lions went about their business. Now, from the Australian point of view, I thought they were brilliant. I thought they were really physical. I thought they played to their strengths. I thought they played sensible rugby. There was lots of nice grubbers in behind. There was some big carrying. I mean, Skelton is built for those conditions. And I thought their scrum performed very well. I thought that was interesting.
Tupou back in.
He makes the difference. Himself and Skelton on that side, like you could see the power coming through there. And it looked like they kind of, because that was an area where I thought the Lions had fairly consistent dominance. I thought in the first 2 tests, I think that's probably fair to say. Certainly throughout the tour, the Lions looked strong at scrum time. And I thought that kind of the roles reversed a little bit there. Looks like the Aussies were pushing them around a bit. I thought they did well at line out, competed well, forced the Lions to make mistakes. And I thought the Lions played into that, as I've mentioned. And yeah, I thought they were clinical when they needed to be. You know, they picked up the scraps. Joe's a big man. He always talks about the scraps. And I thought, they needed the win. They looked like a team that needed it more, and the Lions looked like they were kind of, as you say, maybe 1 foot out the door. Maybe it feels harsh to say it, but that's what it felt like.
Yeah, I do think Australia did by the end of the tour look like, you know, the cliche kind of Joe Schmidt team. Like they were very switched on, as Luke said. Even that drop ball when Kinghorn and Bundyaki were linking up in the wing, Jorgensen was first on it because there was like 4 lines around it, you know. And you saw Kinghorn was kind of like
Kinghorn. That was really bad.
Very poor.
Yeah, it was poor. Just
I don't want to be singling out the non-Irish guy because Bundyaki dropped the ball as well and was kind of
Bundyaki overran him by a mile.
He overran him by a mile. But like the body language of Kinghorn, like shrugging his shoulders, didn't look good. But the fact that Jorgensen picked it up with 4 guys around him and just sprinted in, like I know he's quick, but like it kind of showed they were clued in and switched on. The bigger regret for me from Australia, Jonathan, is just the team selection. I just don't think Joe Schmidt got it right over the course of the series. Like if you look at a host of positions like Angus Bell, who you'll be seeing a lot of, that's one thing to look forward to. Although he's not coming until after November, I think, if I'm right in saying so. Right, yeah. We'll be waiting a while for him. Like I thought he could have been maybe used from the start. Tupou, to be fair, he wasn't in much form coming into the series, and he's been speaking openly about how he hasn't played his best rugby. But you see the damage he does, and that's kind of the selection risk you have to weigh up sometimes. And like people are saying, Salakai Lotto as well, who played a lot in the warm-up games. He wasn't great in the first one, so maybe he kind of ruined his chance. But you know, the scrum half debate was kind of live the whole time. Like out half was kind of a live debate the whole time. Like Harry Potter starting ahead of Dylan Peach. Like Peach was brilliant against the Lions for the Western Force and was really good at the weekend. So quite a couple of things, bits and pieces. I think eventually they got their best team on the pitch, but by then they were 2-0 down, and I know injuries hampered them as well, but as good a job as Schmidt I think did in some areas coaching them up, I just think maybe the selection let them down a small bit.
But I think that shows the value that we sort of spoke about before the tour as well, and really have spoken about going back to November, that they just didn't have enough warm-up games. They looked so undercooked in that series. Whenever you compare the first test to the third test, it just to me shines a new light on the fact that they didn't have enough games coming in to only play 1 test between playing Ireland in November in the Aviva to the first test in the Australia. When you see how they improved over the course of those 3 weeks, it just makes that look all the more like a huge mistake to me.
Yeah, they should have played like 3 games before the series.
Well, I suppose you've one eye on Rugby Championship, you know, so maybe he's kind of thinking like there's a lot to be kind of like that. That's a fairly tiring competition. I know.
I just think 2.
No, I'm not saying sorry. I'm more thinking sorry. I'm talking about the 3 was kind of what was posed to me. 3 feels like maybe oh god, like this is a long season. I think 2, and like if you understand Joe, I think you probably know why he makes the error. Like if you think about all the guys who weren't really selected. We think it's an error. I think a lot of it would have been like he places a massive importance on training. Now, what that does is I think that creates a consistency, which is really important for Australia. I think if you think about where Australian rugby is, I think they were looking for something consistent on the pitch from a point of view. I think they found now what their team is, but you've got to build off a solid foundation. And I think he would have looked at those guys maybe not having coming in with unbelievable form. A few of those guys were kind of unfit coming in, and like a little, maybe not necessarily unfit, but like they were carrying injuries.
You can see his mindset.
I can see exactly. No, sorry, I know exactly how he was picking the team. I'm 99% sure that's what was going through his mind, and I don't really have that much of a problem with that. I mean, I had a problem with that at Joe towards the end of his Irish tenure because he knew everyone, and I was kind of saying, that guy's not playing well for a while, and you still trusted him, and you saw what that kind of manifested in being. But I think with this team, I can kind of understand where he's coming from with it. I do think, with the benefit of hindsight, one more match I think would have really benefited him. Now the other issue there is, well, like he was pretty skinny at 10. Like if you got another injury there, like where did they go? They were going to James O'Connor probably. You know, he probably wouldn't have seen Skelton, although he was always going to play him as soon as he was ready. But Tupou, I mean, would he have really benefited from that? I'm not 100% sure what would have come out of that extra game that we didn't find out. Like, I think what I found interesting is we all have kind of just accepted that the Lions were way better than Australia, but really this was a very tight series. Like, it was a tight series. Think about that second.
Well, it was the tightest ever, wasn't it?
Well, like, sorry, if
One point.
The third test, you can't look at the third test and assume it would have played out anyway like that had the Lions lost. They were on the beer Sunday, they were on Saturday. Like, so the preparation, the third test needs to be thrown out if you want to make that argument, in my opinion.
They went out saying that they were looking for.
What are they going to say?
I know. Yeah.
What are they going to say? We have one eye on Portugal.
I was disappointed with the performance. Well, I won't lie. I was disappointed in the weekend. I thought they were. I thought they could have done. I thought it was a fairly flat showing. I think I can understand why, but it disappointed me. I think New Zealand or South Africa, maybe South Africa, maybe not so much because they might make a raft of changes there. But New Zealand would just pump you 3-0 if they can pump you 3-0. The best teams always would just do that. I think if you think about Farrell, there's no way the coach wasn't thinking that way. I know they were on the Bears, but you could see he was pissed off about it.
Well, I thought tactically, like they were playing like very expansive rugby, or trying to, in like really, really horrible conditions.
They played some. Look, sorry, there was some sensible rugby played, I think, but there was some that wasn't.
It wasn't. Yeah.
But no, they had a few. Do you remember Gibson Park at the start? You know, they went back down short side. They put a few high balls up. They had a little bit of success there, but they didn't. Like, that's a tactic that you should just kept going to. Like, that wasn't something that wasn't going to keep working unless they moved someone back into that line of slot at the back. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. I would have just kept pinging that because they were getting success there. But look, to go back to it, this series hinged on some massive moments, like, really. And I do think I think Australia probably land on that team towards the end of the competition, no matter what happens, right? But and I think that's a way different Australia team than the first two tests. Well, not a way different, not massively different than the second test, but hugely different from the first test. Will. So I would think that even if the Lions were going gung ho, didn't go on the beer on the Sunday or Monday, I still think that might have been a really tricky challenge in the last test.
I don't disagree with that.
I'm not saying there wouldn't have been as flat. My point is that if the Lions had lost that second test, right? Well, like, what are you saying momentum-wise going into that? You're going to go, okay, maybe it's panic stations with the Lions, and I accept that, and they're sharper. But there's also the kind of the weight of expectation was on the Lions. It wasn't really on Australia. They would have gone into that third test going, this is a result for us. Like, this is down to a decider. We think we can win this thing now, where no one expected us to do that. And I felt like the momentum would have switched with them. I think they would have had better team selection. And I think, like, I don't know, it feels to me like this shouldn't have been a moment's test series, but I feel like it might have been. I think Australia would have been really difficult to beat in that third test, Will.
This is why I'm actually retracting my admission, Jonathan, last week when I said I was talking bullshit about Joe Schmidt's team selection for Test 1, because Skelton was so impactful that I do think he should have rolled the dice with them in Test 1, because at 1-0 down, it was such an insipid, poor performance that, like, the first test was almost handed to the Lions with how badly Australia played, and Skelton was so good thereafter that I'm back to wondering again whether or not he could have played a role even off the bench in the first test, albeit if that had been the case, the game was over when the bench.
He never does that.
Yeah.
You won't pick if you're not fit because he expects you might have to play 79 minutes. He's really
he needs some risk taking. You know, sometimes you need to take a risk as well.
Well, I think it might have gone. I think he nearly played it perfectly, bar 2 moments.
But they were hockeyed in the first test, so.
But like, he was so. But he may not have had Skelton for the majority of the series. I felt like it looked to me like nearly Skelton was nearly limping off after the second test. I was sure he wasn't going to play the third.
Having him fit for the third test was irrelevant in some ways because the series was done.
But I think it was a hair from being the perfect decision.
Yeah. Do
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's so, like, I think, like, it's 2 moments, and it's literally the 80, was it the 80th minute? The 81st? Yeah. Whatever it was, the 80th minutes, the Keenan try makes that decision a bad decision. But that sport, like, that is, like, it's on a knife edge. But to me, that's an unbelievable decision to hold him, but to say, no, I'm gonna take a risk here. I'm not including him because I don't think he's fit and he might hurt himself, and then I'm done. Then we never have him. He took a chance he'd have him for 66% of the test matches, and that would be enough to maybe turn the tide. And yeah, that was. I think that's how he was thinking. I could be completely wrong on that. Are you seeing logic in my thinking or no?
You are. You are. And, like,
I feel like that's what he was thinking.
Because it was a risk. It didn't pay off, but I thought I can understand the idea. But I would have liked to have seen Skelton played in that first test.
Well, it feels like a huge caveat to the series, the fact that Australia were so bad in that first test, but they were so bad without their two best players. So it becomes a huge what if, I think, of what if Skelton and Valentini were fit for that first test, and I think you'll not get anyone in Australia that doesn't think that they would have won that test series if the Keenan try hadn't stood. So it does come down to essentially that one moment, really. And it's, I think if we were to look at it from Joe Schmidt's perspective, I think winning the test series with that Australia team would have been viewed as the best achievement of his coaching career. I think it would have eclipsed beating the All Blacks with Ireland. And I think realistically, I think it's not the best achievement of Andy Farrell's coaching career to go and win a series 2-1 in Australia. And I think that probably leads to an awful lot of what we're saying about it. Sort of felt anticlimactic from the Lions. It sort of felt that they left something behind them, even though they won the series, because they didn't go out and make history. To win that series 3-0 would have been to make history. You would have been going back almost 100 years before, for the last Lions team that had done that in a test series. There would have been comparisons. There were comparisons during the week to 1974, even though, we know at least one of the 74 Lions didn't agree with that and was very quick to point out that they had been beaten by Argentina. But
I'm presuming that's Willie John McBride you're talking about.
Yes. very, very quick to make the distinction. But I just think it's almost akin to how I think we view Ireland in the Six Nations over the last couple of years. The fact that it felt like there was a defining achievement there for a team and they didn't quite get it over the line. And I think that ultimately is how we'll come to view the series, even though a test series win for the Lions is not to be sniffed at by any means. I'm not talking it down. But I think in terms of how we remember the series, I think we'll remember it for Keenan's try. I think we'll remember it for, as I say, the fact that it's a real pity that Australia couldn't get their best team out in that first test. And I suppose, bizarrely, we'll remember it for the scenes during the delay in the third test. But I think that ultimately that's it. Really,
I still, and I know this is. I'm really not trying to take a turn to negative town, but I remember it for some really dodgy refereeing.
Yeah.
In the second
I think
test. That is what sticks out. Look at it, I'm going, wow, that is a really if you look at two interpretations of two rules that I'm kind of going.
If you look at the three tests as well, and the fact that Australia were at home magnifies this even greater because it's so rare. Like in the first test, what were we looking at? I remember Tom Curry's high tackle in the air on Tom Lynott that wasn't given as a yellow card. Like we were all raising our eyebrows at that. What were the other ones?
He has they got
Tadhg Furlong. Yeah, Tadhg Furlong didn't get a card in the first test. That you often see that given. Obviously, the Tizano clear out is the big one, and then Don Sheehan, the one being missed at the weekend. Like I know they won that game anyway, but it's still it was a very bad missed call.
Yeah, it feels. Do you know what feels unusual about it? For a home team to not really get they're kind of a lot of big decisions. Feels like they didn't get any, it feels like they didn't get, there was no tilt over the course where you go, oh, God, the crowd's on the referee's back, the referee's rattled here, he's made a couple of, kind of hometown decisions. And I can't make up my mind about whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. It just feels like, to my mind, where I'm leaning at the moment is probably a bad thing. Even though a lot of those decisions are kind of on the edge, it feels like a lot to get in your favour.
The Sheehan one at the weekend is just a missed call. It's not like
that can happen.
It's not a decision in the favour of the.
And Will, his arms were a little bit active in it, and he's not. It's not like a dive as aggressively off the field. Like he manages to kind of keep driving his feet, if you know what I mean, into him. Now, I'm not trying to defend him. I promise you, I'm not trying to defend him. Right?
Sounds like it.
I'm just saying, I can see how if you look at it from behind, you can see him trying to get an arm into play. If you get me, it's not like he tucks the arm. Do you know when you see a guy tuck the arm down by the hip, and he's going, "I'm going to absolutely melt you with the shoulder." I can see him trying to use the arms. He doesn't use them. It's definitely a yellow card, but I can kind of see it, and I could see how the referee look at that and go, you can see he's still driving the feet. He hasn't lost complete control coming in there. Now, when you look at slow mo, look, there's a ban there, and that's I can accept that, but that one to me seems like. I'm not thinking about that one as much as the Dan Sheehan try. Like that, to my mind, feels really odd. That looked like a really odd decision at the time, and I still don't know why there hasn't been more kerfuffle about that one. I think it's because obviously the Keenan one is the big moment because it decides the game essentially. But really, that had a major impact on the game as well, the Sheehan one. So I don't know. It feels like that's definitely. Sorry, I know it feels like I've taken a turn to negative. I think the Lions were the better team overall, but not by much. And it feels like there was only a few moments. If they'd gone the other way, I would say I'm not as convinced that that third test is, even with the Lions being completely clued in, that's a foregone conclusion in those conditions. If you think about the impact Tupou had, if you think about the impact Skelton had in the game, the other substitutions that come in the back line, I think they all made a big difference. And I think Australia would have been going in with momentum. And they figured out more about their team through the process than the Lions did, I think.
Yeah.
They got better. They got a good bit better.
Yeah, it's just a pity that first test ended up being such a non-event in some ways.
Yeah, no, it is, and that's why I think that's my sense is that's people's that's the impression that people have been left with upon the series being over and done with, and that is not my impression of it. It felt to me like, as you said, Australia weren't able to field their first team. They had a lot of guys injured. They figured it out in the second test and probably should have closed the door on the Lions. They still should have probably won the thing, to be honest with you. It's a brilliant comeback from the Lions, but they should have closed that out somewhere. And I think the Lions got fairly walloped. Like I thought the Lions got nearly as badly beaten as the Aussies did in the first test, in the third test.
But the series was over at that stage.
I know, but they
sorry,
were going out. They changed. There's the same team. They were going out. They would have been talking the same thing all week, even if they went in the beer on the Sunday. Like, that, to my mind, if you really wanted the 3-0, it was a little bit disappointing for them to do that. They were always going to have 2 days on the piss after the third test. Like, go home being, as Jonathan said, remembered among the pantheon of greats in terms of Lions. They still go down as series winners, but it would have been unbelievable to be a 3-0. Bloody hard thing to do, as we found out.
I was saying to Rudd the other day, I actually think, in a funny way, losing on Saturday might enhance their legacy in the long term, because I think people will remember the overall series as more competitive and more of a
that's what I remember.
I think if it was a 3-0 job, I actually don't think we'd be like, what an unbelievable achievement. We'd be like, geez, Australia were shit. I actually think that's what we would say. I don't think we necessarily. It's one of those things where, like, the more you beat Australia, the less credit you get. I think the way it actually played out with a great Australian performance in week 2 and then backing it up in week 3, it's like, oh geez, actually, like, when we look back,
there's something there.
When we look back,
I still think it's hard to beat a team 3 times at home. Like, top 8 to 9 nations, they're generally pretty good. 3 times to beat them, like, unless they've got a terrible coaching staff. Like Wales at the moment are probably, and I don't know, they top. No, I'm not sure what position they are in terms of standings. Maybe that's the wrong way to think about rugby, given how weird the standings are. But do you know what I mean? Like, a rugby playing nation 3 times at home, to not have one game at least out of 3, that's really tight. It's very unusual.
Yeah.
There's pride. There's generally a good coach there, who can figure something out. As Joe found out, the selection evolved over time, and a few people kind of came back in who maybe weren't in great form, who made a massive impact. Lots of things happen over three test wins. It's big. It's hard to do, really hard.
Yeah. Let's go through the Irish players then. We'll start with Tadhg Furlong, Jonathan. Player of the series in the end. Went 80 minutes in all 3 tests. I think he went 80 minutes all 4 times in November. Went 84 times out of 5 in the Six Nations and played 71 minutes in the other game. So he's really they've squeezed every last bit of juice out of him over the course of the year. That's 12 tests in total. For me, like, the key moment of the entire tour was Andy Farrell backing him and backing Tom Curry in tandem for that first test. I thought they were both unbelievable in all the first 2 tests when they won the series. And without that selection, what was maybe the consensus selection going into that? Maybe Chesnam at 6 and Jack Morgan or Van der Fleer at 7. Like, that's a very different back row than what was that kind of grizzled, gnarly, Conan, Curry, Byrne triumvirate that ended up being so influential in the first 2 weeks. He had a phenomenal tour, and that decision, really, the whole thing hinges on it for me. I don't know what you think about how he played and the decision to even give him the test berth in the first place now at this juncture.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, before the first test, we were sort of debating the balance of the back row. I think we were all worried about the balance of the back row, specifically with Byrne and Curry, really. And, in the first test, certainly they were the 2 best players on the pitch. I think if you transport yourself back only like 4 or 5 weeks, we were talking about has Tadhg Furlong had too long a season? Have all those minutes that he's played for Ireland in big tests caught up with him? Does he still have the legs to play at 6? And then he's the best player in the series. Like it's an amazing turnaround, but almost a characteristic turnaround, if that makes sense. Like it's incredible. Was incredible to watch, but I think it's almost what we've come to expect from him, because he lifts his game in big games to such a level that he's made a career out of this really for the last sort of 10 years. And he's really become known as, this is a phrase that gets used an awful lot during Lions series, but he is that test match animal. You know, he's incredible for that. And it's massive for him, I think, that he was able to do this on this stage, because as much, you know, everything that he's done with Ireland, everything that he did with the Scarlets and now with Munster, like I think this is ultimately career defining for him. I think this is what he will be remembered for. I think the Lions is still that big. The player of the series for the Lions is still that big, even though there was that sort of confusion over there being 2 of them if you were watching on TV. But I think it's such a big achievement for him, and it's such vindication for Andy Farrell as well. Like Andy Farrell gets talked an awful lot about as a man manager, and there's been an awful lot of that's come out through the tour again. But I think this was another instance that really shows his ability as a selector, which maybe doesn't get spoken about as much.
Yeah, he has a great knack sometimes for selection. Like, you know, if you're comparing Farrell and Schmidt, and I know we're talking about Ty Brown, but look, we can go back to that. But I think Farrell's a much better selector than Joe Schmidt. That's one thing because obviously I don't play for international rugby, but one thing I can do is look at team sheets that are picked and make a judgment on who I think is a better selector. Even when Joe Schmidt's Ireland teams were going well, often people were like scratching their head a bit at some selections. I feel like Farrell is a better selector, or certainly, more closely along with what I think anyway. Maybe that doesn't mean he's a better selector, but certainly I see some of his team sheets and I'm more like aligned with his thinking than I was with Joe Schmidt's. And even the Australian team selection, as I referred to, I thought there was a number of things that I just thought were maybe the incorrect calls.
Yeah, I think Joe's probably changed a little bit as a selector, in my opinion. I think he probably has become a little bit more conservative as he become an international coach. I think he's probably said that on a few occasions. You know, less time to see players. Like I think his way of thinking, like where he has the most impact, really is in a club situation. Really, now I know he's been an unbelievable international coach. But where he has the most impact is where he can see the players for like a long period of time. Now it can be oppressive, you know, but and because he's, you know, very demanding, he's a very consistent guy. He's all about habits, so like, and he really delivers on that himself. Expects the players to do the same. It doesn't suit everyone, right? But I thought he was a better selector when he was at Leinster. I thought he picked guys a little bit. You know, he was a bit more. This guy's training better. Don't care who you are. You're kind of. I'm going to leave you out. You know what I mean? He had a few big calls here and there.
I feel like it was more straightforward with Leinster.
Well, it is a bit more straightforward. Like there's a lot of positions where it's not as tight when you're selecting, right? Yeah. But there's also a few ones. Think of O'Malley going in ahead of Dricko, was it? Against Claremont. You know, there's a few. He's made big calls here and there. And I think, look, I wouldn't say, if you ask me honestly, it's probably not I wouldn't consider it his greatest strength as a coach. I think his greatest strength is his ability to think about the game and to deliver brilliant standards and all the big parts of the game. He's really good at breaking down skills and how he delivers something. It makes the teams really hard to beat, and he can make an average player into a really good player. I think he's really, really good at that, and he's perfect for Australia. I think, as we've probably seen, just given where they are. And he's an unbelievable coach. Honestly, I always think, like, I would love a journalist to sit in on, you know, a month's worth of meetings with him and go, wow, like.
Sure, he could think of nothing worse.
I was going to say, but I'd say you'd absolutely love it. I can tell you what the main problem with that would be.
Yeah. No, but I think he's so good at thinking about it, like challenging you, and he challenges you with things that you're kind of going, God, I've played sports for years. That seems so important now. Now that you've pointed that out to me, that thing I'm doing, or that thing that someone else is doing, he's just brilliant. He had so many brilliant moments as a coach. Like, and I said, Jesus Christ, like my dad. So my dad was an international rugby player, and has loved all the technical bits of the game. Always watching things, where your foot is, you know, how you think about all these things. I've been listening to someone like that since I'm 5. But I found this guy on another level. I thought I understood rugby, and then I went and gone, whoa, like this guy has broken everything down so well, and I feel like he understands so much of the game. Like, he's a brilliant coach, and I have to think Andy Farrell. It's very hard to pit them against each other, because I'd say he had a huge influence on Andy Farrell. So
yeah, I know.
I think I know you're talking about the selection. I know you're just talking about the selection thing, and I think Farrell it sounds to me, and just from meeting the guy, I always liked Joe, to be honest with you, but Farrell does seem like he's a player. He's been in change rooms since he's 15 or 16. You know what I mean? He's a bit of a character. He's a hard edge. He's been there. He's done it. Like, Joe has to earn your respect through thinking. Farrell walks into a room and you're going to go, oh fuck, it's Andy Farrell. Like,
Hugh Jones actually said as much.
Like, do you know what I mean? He's been a player. He's been a great player, and he's been a captain, and all these kind of things. So he has that advantage maybe, and I think maybe it's easier for him, just given his personality, to probably connect with guys. So yeah, to answer and that's a very long-winded answer. I hope I've given maybe some insight into maybe what just what a player's view might be on maybe particularly Schmidt. But yeah, like, he does seem to be a little bit better at the selection thing, but I wouldn't say he's imperfect.
No.
That's not the claim. I know that's not your claim.
It's not as if we debate Andy Farrell's selections all the time. It's just like, think of what he's done, like, promoting Jameson Gibson Park. The time he started Mac Hansen against Wales in the first game of the 2022 Six Nations, that was completely out of left field. Mac Hansen only been in Ireland for a couple of months, and he ended up obviously being, he went on the line store, obviously got injured, so didn't play any tests, but has been a very, very good player. He's had some good kind of moments like that of kind of promoting guys and showing faith. And obviously this was kind of the opposite, in the sense that he was going back to two old war horses who hadn't been playing well. That's kind of more of a Joe Schmidt selection, ironically, who he would back the guys who've been, who kind of some older players maybe. That was kind of a Joe thing towards the end. Yeah. And it actually worked for Andy Farrell this time. But what I love about Joe Schmidt is, like, even though he's not a big personality like, say, an Eddie Jones or something like that, he's one of rugby's great characters, because when he's involved that it'll be good, it'll be competitive. Like, I don't think there's another coach in World Rugby who would have gotten them as competitive for this series. Certainly the second test, there's probably a short list of guys. I think there's something about his involvement that just makes things more interesting for me anyway, without giving sound bites necessarily. But
I think what with him is that regardless, they're going to be... I think that was why the first test was so disappointing, maybe, was that we kind of all expected them to have figured, just to have something new, or have
like the second test,
the second test, where you're kind of going, okay, right. Well, but maybe it does. Maybe it brings us back. So let me just finish on the Joe point first. I think we when he goes out to and it's a Joe Schmidt team, you go, oh, we better be ready for something. And I think he'll have figured out a way to maybe stop us that maybe no one else has tried. Or, he was always brilliant at that, and I think that's what you always expect from him. So I agree with you. He doesn't have the playing CV, but he certainly has an incredible CV. And you always, you expect something with an Andy Farrell team, a Sean Edwards team, a Gatlin team, all these great characters. Joe has the same. He always expects something from him, and it's always going to be a challenge, no matter what. Even no matter the quality of the team, they're going to challenge you somewhere. There'll be some new thinking, or there'll be some old thinking that really is effective. So, I think that's what I think is great about a Joe Schmidt team. He is a bit of a character. Like, you can see the intensity, and I always think the veil gets lifted a bit when he has, when it's a bad day out or a bad refereeing decision. You can see the eyes, like, he's got that. You see a killer mentality. Like, maybe it's a kind of a. It's a weird thing to say, but you can see the intensity there. Like, you can see the work he's put in, isn't it? You can see, like, he couldn't really contain himself after the second test. He was furious. He's quoting the rule numbers and all.
920.
Yeah, like, you can see how much work goes in and how much it means. And that goes alongside all the thinking. So he is super intense, and he's brilliant to work with. I loved working with him. Yeah.
So glad he came back to coach Australia. Like, I just feel like someone like that, I just want coaching. I'd love to see him go back into club rugby. I don't know if he ever will, just because of his family situation, his schedule or whatever. But I'd love to see him go back in and coach a club.
It feels like a waste to have someone like that.
Like, when he went to work for World Rugby, and I know it was in rugby still, but I was like, that's a waste. He needs to be coaching a team. Like, we even saw, as an assistant with the All Blacks at the World Cup. Like, even then he was having...
Got them sorted. They were in a mess.
100%. Yeah, like,
definitely had an impact there.
It was brilliant. So, we completely digressed from Tadhg Furlong, giving him his
sorry, Jonathan's waiting for some feedback on it. Yeah,
we're moving past Tadhg Furlong now, because I want to get to the other guys. Number 2 in the list, Jonathan, it was Dan Sheehan. He had an unbelievable first 2 tests. Obviously, the line-out went haywire kind of at the weekend.
They were bad throws, though, were they?
I don't think so. Just when the line-out is malfunctioning, he's
everyone's at fault.
Point and shoot at the hooker firstly. But
James Ryan going off, I think, had a big impact. And then you see, obviously, Ollie Chesham coming in was maybe less familiar with the rule in the line-out. So I think it was a combination
Tadhg
of
as
things in the
well.
set piece. Yeah.
Tadhg doesn't help either,
But
Johnny.
what a player he's become, Jonathan. Like, he's obviously, it's easy to remember, or forget, sorry, rather, now that like ACL tear in South Africa last year, didn't play rugby until January. Hit the ground unbelievably fast in the Six Nations. Off the bench against England, he was absolutely dynamic and electric, and was like a shoe-in from then on. Like, when he tore that ACL, you're wondering, geez, he might miss the tour. He might not get back until 12 months later. But what a turnaround that's been, and he was so good in Australia. Those first two tests, his try scoring record is a sight to behold. But he's his all round game. He really is like he's probably Ireland's X factor player. We have a few others, but God, he's just so dynamic.
Yeah, he's undisputably world class, and I don't know how many players in the Lions or even in world rugby really at the minute that you would say are undisputably world class. But he's one of them, and he showed it again. We've already talked about the not getting the red card, so we'll not go over that again. But I think the phrase X factor I think is a really interesting one, because I saw people comparing him to Keith Wood during this Lions tour, because he does have that added ability to make those line breaks. He carries in that way. The line out up until the third test was unbelievable.
Sam Warburton gave him the kiss of death. He was like, he's only lost 1 out of 41, and he immediately from that point on,
2 out of 42. Yeah, he's great, isn't he? Like, X Factor feels though. Maybe because I think he's so consistent though as well, isn't he? Like, if you look at him in the contact areas, what I love, his technique for a big guy. Like, I know we were talking about the clean out is obviously not right on the weekend, but generally speaking, his technique is brilliant. He's so aggressive. His body height's brilliant. He's got great balance. He's sidestepping guys out wide, even though he's had a very serious knee injury. That's not an easy thing to get comfortable with again, because he's a guy who could probably run through someone, which of course he can do. And he feels like a guy who's always in the right place at the right time, and you can see him executing skills. Like, he's just an excellent guy to watch. I love watching him. Do you know, he's a guy you kind of go, I love that he's playing, because he's so good to watch. And he's
top
great.
5 in the world, I'd say.
Oh yeah,
not even at his position. I mean, like an overall player. Like, he's such a game changer. Like, you have a hooker who can like do things that like very few other forwards can do.
Maybe
he's so quick. Like Ronan O'Gara after Leinster beat La Rochelle in January, like Roger was talking about Leinster, the team they have going on to maybe win the Champions Cup, and he singled out Dan Sheehan as like the X factor and all the speed he brings. It's like, I know it's strange, I'm talking about a hooker, but like the speed he brings in the wide channels is serious.
Yeah, no, he's an unbelievable player. Yeah, you'd hate to come up against him out there, because he can do anything.
He turned Mac Hansen. Remember, he turned Mac Hansen inside out a couple of years ago.
Don't know if he'd do that to him now. Hansen is a way better player, but he did. I remember him stepping him, and I was like, oh, like,
No, it's probably
I'm not sure. He probably was breaking the tackle anyway, but no,
I think the
Hansen's
consistency thing is so important as well. Like, it's a really good point to make, the consistency, because I suppose it's akin to Furlong whenever Furlong first emerged, because he does everything that his position should do excellently, as well as having these added elements as well that really sort of redefine the way we view the position in the way that Furlong did with his passing, Sheehan does with his carrying.
Yeah.
He's magic. And you think you've got Kelleher, from an Irish perspective, you've got Kelleher there as well. Like, how blessed are Ireland to have those two guys there? Because Kelleher is a serious player as well. He's had his injury concerns here and there.
Not a mixed enough tour.
Yeah, he has, but he's still a brilliant player. Like, he is a brilliant player. And like, it's funny, like, if someone gets a shot in the test matches, maybe that might have been different for Kelleher. If you think about, like, Byrne didn't have a good lead up either, but he's now the player of the tour because he went brilliant in the test matches. So you just don't know how these things would.
Kelleher played off the bench in all three. Like, he had a good second test.
He had a good second test when he came in.
Yeah,
it was good.
Yeah, got Sim in at the weekend, and first test, the line out was a bit sticky, but number 3 was Gibson Park. Not a huge amount to say. He had a good tour. Like, his box kicking was really good. Didn't play well at the weekend, but I don't think
tricky condition.
A lot of people didn't.
And
he did have one really good box kick at the start. As you said, they didn't really do it as much.
They didn't go back to the tactic, which I think he has to take a little bit of ownership over that. I think I would like to, like, a guy like him, particularly when the other side of that, it's tricky when you go behind as well. Like, you're kind of going, oh God, am I kicking this ball away again? Like, when are we actually going to get points on the board? But that was a game to do that, to build pressure. Kind of like when they were in the second test, they they were good at building pressure at the right moments to get themselves back into the game. They didn't panic too early, and I felt like that was a tactic that they should have gone back to a bit more. And I thought Finn Russell should have kicked a bit more as well. Like, bombs across field. They should have changed up the point of attack a little bit. Even chips behind grubbers just made it a little bit messier for the Aussies. And I think Gibson Park probably could have controlled that a little bit better. And I didn't think it was unbelievable when the Aussies were on top in the first half of the second test either. I think he could have been better, but that's being harsh. Like, I think they lost the first bit of the second test probably in the pack. It was the first time they lost the gain line kind of consistently. Was that kind of period. And in fairness, he was pretty solid decision making wise, close to the line. There was no real, there was no odd decision when you go, buddy, come on, we need to get a try here. Do you know what I mean? I think he was pretty solid without being excellent.
And he had some good decisions around the line for tries. Like, I think was it the Sheehan one.
That was a nice one, yeah. And do you know what? Over the 3 test matches, I think his kicking was very good. Yeah, I think overall, if you think about him over the whole 3 tests, that was definitely a point of difference for the Lions for the most part. As Gibson Park's kicking was better. And
considering Joe, one of the controversies, or not controversies, one of the selection dilemmas was he went with Jake Gordon at number 9 for his kicking, and I thought Gibson Park out-kicked him.
Definitely did, agreed. Yeah.
Then you have other good 9s who maybe could have added something else. Jack Conan then, 6 consecutive line starts at number 8, Jonathan, which is so impressive. It's a position where, traditionally the big back row ball carrier gets named, and he's gotten their 2 test series in a row. So interesting though where he fits in now when he goes back to club level, goes back to international level. You're probably looking at him to take that number 20 jersey again. Like, as good as he's been, it looks like it might be Ryan Baird's time at 6, and Doris is going to be coming back from injury. Remains to be seen, I suppose, Doris's fitness. Like, we don't have an update. We'll probably get one in the next couple of weeks as pre-season kicks into play. But it's funny for a guy who started 6 Lions tests in a row. He's not. He has been an Ireland starter at various points of his career, but not for extended periods of time, really.
Yeah, but I think it is testament to how well he's played and how good a player he is in general. And like, I know we're all fans of him here, but the fact that we didn't really talk about Keelan Doris that much during the test series, we're talking about somebody who was essentially nailed on to be not just a starter, but captain of the entire tour. And we didn't really talk about him that much over the last 6 weeks. And all of that is down to how consistent Jack Conan has been. I think whenever it comes to where he fits in with Ireland, it is that sort of double-edged sword, because he was so good off the bench during the Six Nations. Like, he made such an impact coming off the bench in the Six Nations. Arguably, he made more of an impact off the bench than when he started during the Six Nations, most especially in that England game.
He did have an excellent test series as well. I thought he was really solid. But he had 1 or 2...
In a way that he when we see him at his best in Ireland and Leinster, he's usually much more eye-catching. You know what I mean? Like,
he's making to do that at international level all the time.
But even with Ireland, he makes a fair few bursts. Yeah. But I don't disagree with you, though. I thought it was a much more, I suppose, physical. Like, he was carrying hard in the trenches.
He
was
tackling. In the trenches.
I think he got 24 tackles in Test 2, which is the most in a Lions Test match since, like, 2004 or say 5 or something like that. So, like, that shows how his work rate was off the charts.
Oh, I thought he was brilliant. And I thought his technique was excellent. Like, he was really effective at ruck time. He was really effective in the tackle. I thought he had a brilliant series, and I think he probably did what was required. And sometimes that means you're not going to be a headline grabber, but there's a reason he was a shoe-in for all 3 matches, and I think that was because he was delivering those things throughout. And it just shows you can be a great player by delivering the basics. And let's not forget, that was an unbelievable pass over the top.
That was nice.
Like, that was a lovely piece of skill. So he does. We're not talking about it as a highlight moment because we're talking about Keenan. Probably for the most part, we're thinking about Keenan. But that for me was if I was a player coming back from the tour, I'm thinking, God, like, no one's talking. Did I make an impact? Yeah. To me, that he had his moment.
I'm not saying he didn't make an impact.
No, you're not saying that. I'm just talking about it. Yeah. I'm talking about generally the feeling. Like, no one's. There's not many people talking about Conan, but I think he had a brilliant series.
So obviously Doris is nailed on at 8 almost all the time. There was 2 Champions Cup finals against La Rochelle where Conan was 8 and Doris was 6, and there was a consensus maybe that didn't really work that well. Like, where is Doris stronger than Conan in your opinion? Because the coaches seem to have that view. Like, what's your read of the 2 lads and what they do differently, or where Doris maybe has an edge?
God, it's really difficult. I think Doris might be...
He's 6 years younger as well, which maybe plays into some of the thinking.
He's a little more dynamic with the ball. I think he's better movement side to side. So I think what we saw from Conan was he'll run over you. Yeah. Whereas, and sorry, of course Doris can do that, but Doris seems to me to have, like, he's a little bit more footwork, I think. I think he's a little bit of a better handler. slightly, but not much. But he is a better handler of the ball. I think he's better throwing a pass at the back, etc. And the tip-ons. I think Doris is a little bit more than him there, and that's it. And I think
He gets more turnovers.
he does. He's better on the deck than him.
Doris is very good on the
but
deck.
he's different on the deck. He gets more of the turnovers, but I don't know if he's sorry, they're both brilliantly effective, but I think I'm not sure he's a better tackler than him. Like Conan's an unbelievable tackler. Like when he puts a shoulder on you, he's very impactful there, and he's very impactful at the ruck. And I think sometimes that's a little bit unseen because maybe you don't get your whole, not everyone on the team is kind of picking you up going, like Byrne has the turnover and everyone's around him kind of picking him out of the ruck going, and a big roar is kind of let out. You're on camera, you come up with the ball with the blue scrum cap. I don't think he has those moments, and of course, Doris does have more of those moments. So there's a bit more of that maybe with Doris, maybe the more eye-catching moments. But for effectiveness, it's close. It's bloody close. And I think that for a long time, I think Doris, I think he was playing better than Doris. I do. We had these discussions over the course of a couple of years. Not to take anything away from Doris. I think again, like the hooker position, extremely lucky to have two very, very proficient.
I think the last 2 years, I think he's deserved more game time. Like even before tonight, I just went back and I was looking at the back row makeup for those two Championship finals I just referred to. And then in 2024, he was on the bench against Toulouse and he only got 20 minutes off the bench. Sorry, they went to extra time, so he played more. But I was like, geez, like the thought that he only got 20 minutes in the Championship final when he's so
good. Yeah,
I just like
feels like you're not using him enough.
Yeah, I know. It's a funny one. Tadhg Furlong then, Jonathan, starts on all three tests. I think I looked it up. The last time he started in 3 consecutive games for Leinster was 3 years ago. Like I just leave that there. People can do that what they want. 9 consecutive Lions tests overall, which ties the record in the professional era with Alan Jones. Like phenomenal achievement to start all 3 tests in all 3 of the countries. It's just an unbelievable achievement, and kind of like a lot of players, poor enough at the weekend maybe, but had a really good, I thought, first and second test and looked, close to his best. Maybe not at his absolute best, but considering he was so short of game time coming into it, it's fairly remarkable that he was actually able to get to the level he did. What was your assessment of how he played?
No, absolutely. I think coming into the tour, I would have been really concerned about where he was at, just because he'd had so little rugby over the last year, really. He was coming in, you would have felt so undercooked. And it's probably a testament to the player that he is in terms of ability, but also the dedication, which maybe doesn't get spoken about as much because he's seen as this sort of relaxed character. He's always quick with a one-liner and press conferences, that sort of thing. And that can sometimes get misconstrued for not taking things seriously. But to have all those injuries and to not be able to play games, he must have looked after himself so well in other ways to be able to just drop back into what is the pinnacle of Test rugby in the Lions and look so at home through that test series. I thought it was really, really impressive how well he was able to play and how quickly he was able to get back to what you would really say was the Furlong of a couple of years ago before this run of injuries.
It looked like it took a lot out of him when he was sitting on that beanbag chair during the lighting today.
Not a great angle.
He was covered in a blanket, and he was like, looked like an old person. But what did you make of his last couple of weeks?
Brilliant. Yeah, it's the extras that you get with him. So you get all the solid parts of his game. But I think it's the ball handling, though. It's always stood out to me as just a magic bit. He's just a footballer in a prop body, in a giant human being's body. But he makes a massive difference.
Can he sustain it, you think? Because
I hope so, yeah.
The sense is, look, and we don't know, but the sense is that he targeted this
from a way out.
And was always wanted to get to this tour and play this test series. I will be very interested to see in November, Ireland played the All Blacks, Japan, South Africa and Australia. How many of the 4 games does he play? Will he be able to get back to that level, or is it a case that he was able to get one last kind of sustained run? But obviously, we don't know that.
Oh God, it feels like that. It feels like he's got more in the tank than that to me.
He'll turn 33 in November.
Yeah, he has to. I know he's at miles on the clock, but he doesn't have that many. And I think what he needs to do now is figure out a way to get himself on the pitch as often as possible. Because as soon as you start missing out on games, that's when the problems happen, because you're coming up to speed against guys who are playing all the time, training all the time. So he needs to figure out a way that he can consistently do those things. I think Jonathan's right. It looks like he looked after the body really well, because he wouldn't have been able to deliver what he delivered without doing that. So really pleased for him. I think there was a period where I thought he was, just in terms of how good he was at his position and all the extra bits that you got from him, there was a period where I thought he was the best player in the world. And I would stand over that argument. There was a year where I was kind of going, this guy, everything he touches, his tackling, his running with the ball, his decision making. And then you get all the extra bits. He's a tall guy. He's great in lifting the line out. He's very smart around the pitch. He had everything to me. I felt like he was the best player in the world at a point. So we don't produce many guys like that. But we've got a few of them at the moment, and I think he's in that category for me. So I think it's really vital that they try. I think it'd be vital actually that they sit down after this, or he sits down himself with some of the trainers and goes, "What happened on this tour? Why was I able to stay fit? What happened here?" And really think about it, because he to me, he should go down in the pantheon of greats, and he probably will. Like Alan Wynne Jones, you're in with the greats there. If you're anything, you're kind of emulating that guy. You're in stratospheric territory. But there's a lot left in his career, and he needs to find a way to get it out of him, because he'll have the rest of his life to be able to do whatever he's doing afterwards. So, I think he's a key guy for Leinster. I think if they want to win a Heineken Cup, they need to find a way to get him on the pitch.
Too early for that chat.
No, but my point is he's a key guy, and they need him like the Lions need him. Yeah. And Ireland need him too. Like, he's vital for every team he plays in. So they need to figure out how to get him on the pitch. Even though Bealham's an excellent, and for Ireland particularly, he has been excellent. They need him.
It always jars to me that Finlay Bealham is going to be 34 in October. He's a year older than Furlong. For some reason in my head, even though I know this fact.
Like he started later.
I know this to be fact, but I'm always like, he's like 6 years younger. I don't know. I think it's just Furlong has always looked so battered. I completely agree. It'd be interesting to see how much he gets to play next year, and if he can get a sustained run, it would be huge for both Leinster and Ireland. Hugo Keenan then obviously ended up being the hero in the second test with that try. Well known now, he had a very difficult start to the tour, was unwell, lost a bit of weight, a couple of poor performances then, but ultimately I think a very solid tour. Then it was Gary Ringrose on the list. Obviously, like, Gary Ringrose's tale is a what if. Like, he was playing great rugby, then obviously we actually never chatted about it because of how it felt, like pulling himself out of the game with the concussion.
Heartbreaking for Gary.
Like,
what a good guy as well.
Yeah, like it's tough. Like, to be fair, like, people are saying that he definitely won't be there 4 years. He'll be 34 in 4 years. He'll be younger than Bundy is now. So I don't think I think it's achievable.
He's
Obviously,
in great shape.
Yeah,
if you see him kind of kitted up, like, he's a really great athlete.
He was nailed on to start like all three tests, and like he would have been a Lions test series winner. Like, it's just you feel for the guy, because obviously he had a concussion against the Brumbies, came back, then kind of felt the symptoms, and
it just shows you like everything that you need to. It kind of tells you everything you need to know about the guy. He's the ultimate team player. Like, he wasn't going to take away. So as much as that hurt him, he wasn't going to take anything away from the team by putting himself out there when he wasn't going to be able to contribute. So very impressive guy. Very impressive to be able to make that decision. And
was playing really well.
Very disappointed for him.
Yeah, because he was actually thought he looked really sharp when
the dummy against the Brumbies was delicious, and then the pass and the finish obviously looked very quick as well to get the Marcus Smith grubber. So it was very disappointing for the guy. But like you said, it's not over. But 4 years seems like a lot for a guy who's so. Oh, he's so physical on the pitch.
Yeah, it's tough.
Feels like it'll be not impossible.
Not impossible, but yeah, maybe.
Feels like a big ask.
Yeah, so hopefully he gets another opportunity in a few years' time. Joe McCarthy next. Very unlucky, because obviously he was the breakout star of the early part of the tour. Got man of the match against the Western Force, I think, but he certainly played very well in that game. Ended up starting the first test. Really impactful performance, then gets that foot injury, and it kind of remains to be seen if he might have to miss some time, because I think there was talk he might have to get a procedure done, but I'm not sure what that update was. But obviously very unlucky he didn't get to play another part in the test series. I think they missed him as the series went on. I think they would have definitely brought him back in had he been able to play in that third test.
Certainly from a bench slot.
Yeah. Well, he was starting, like, so.
No, I know, but like you say, whatever. So if he's carrying an injury, you know who I'd have. Yeah. No, but if he's having an injury, if he has an injury, well, maybe they go. Yeah. That's what I meant by on the bench.
Yeah, it's that kind of tricky foot injury that I think could be quite troublesome as well. So hopefully he's fit to go for the kind of early part of next season. Andrew Porter's an interesting one, Jonathan. Must say, very perplexed about how the Loosehead battle was handled. Like, Ellis Genge to me was like one of the players of the tour. Like, he was really good in the first test. Then he was kind of put on the bench for the second test. Okay. Then he was really impactful in the end game there as well. I thought he played better than Porter did in that game. And then he was on the bench again. And I don't know. What do you make of how that was handled and Porter's tour generally? I really think Ellis Genge should have started all three tests.
Yeah, I think it was interesting in the sense that coming into the tour, I would have said that was the position where I really wasn't worried about who started and who came off the bench, because it was probably going to be, the difference of 50 minutes to 30 minutes, or maybe even 45 to 35. And I thought they were both such good players and both so even that I didn't think it was really going to matter. And then the way that the tour progressed, and to be fair, I would say this is more about how much Ellis Genge impressed me rather than much to do with Porter. But by the end of the tour, it looked to me like Genge was actually clearly ahead. And I wondered, did his own sort of personal prospects just suffer a tad because of how bad the bench was for the Lions in the first test? And Farrell may be thinking that he needed to distribute things a little bit better so that they had that bench impact in the second test, which obviously they did get, and obviously proved so important because that test was so tight. I don't think that will be any solace to Genge himself, because obviously he would have wanted to start all 3 tests. And I know that you've said in the past you don't really agree with the idea of not having your 15 best players starting, but that's the only thing that I can really see is why that would have been the case, because as much as Porter is a great player, and as much as I would have had them dead level at the start of the tour, I think it was fairly obvious throughout that Genge was in better form.
It's funny, Jonathan, because you make reference to that because, like I say, after the second test, I was chatting with Keane and Rudd, and I was like, and Jesus, like Genge on the bench, what a terrible decision. He was so good when he came on. And Keane was like, Genge on the bench was so good when he came on. Ergo, like the system works. And I was like, well, that's one way of looking at it, I suppose. We're looking at it completely through the opposite lenses. But I guess, like, I don't know, is there... theoretically, there's merit to it. I get Jonathan's point. Bench was really poor. Save something for the bench. But then the way the first test played, or second test played out, I'm like, geez, but Genge was so good. If I had that for 55 minutes...
Yeah, I always lean that way.
Yeah, I don't know. It's funny when me and Keane were literally just like...
Yeah, no, like, and sorry, people who, when you win the game, that's always what people say.
Yeah.
So good off the bench, they won the game, but they won it with the last play. Probably shouldn't have won it. So, don't know. I agree.
What about Porter generally?
So Porter, I thought he was very good on tour. I thought he was excellent. I think Genge was brilliant. I thought, and it's interesting. Jonathan had them neck and neck. I would have had Porter ahead, and then maybe that's a bias because I see more of Porter. I don't see as much of Genge, but I didn't realise how good Genge was in the tight. That was probably the bit that surprised me. I kind of knew you get a few rampage. You know, you're going to get a rampaging run or two from him around the pitch. What I think probably is maybe forgotten about Porter is that he's excellent on the ground. You always get a poach, or you generally get one poach a game or 2 poaches a game from Porter. Like, I think he's pretty excellent around the pitch. He's underrated around the pitch. He's a very good defender as well, and super fit. Like, he gets through a mountain of work. In saying that, I thought he had a good tour, but I thought Genge had a brilliant tour. And I was amazed. It was one of the things we didn't really get to talk about. There's so many talking points on a Lions tour. But I was amazed at the chat so early about, like, not picking Porter. Porter was always in my team. But I would agree. I thought, I was surprised Genge, having played as well as he played. I thought that was one of the selections that was a little bit unusual, I will say.
Yeah, you wonder what the thinking was behind it. Was it the bench element, or was it just with his Irish shot on?
I don't know. I don't know what that is. Porter's brilliant to me. Like,
no, yes,
yeah.
I'm just saying. I thought Genge played better on the tour.
And that's what I was. Sorry, I just said the same thing as you. I don't know what it would lead me to believe that he thinks along the lines of, like, a lot of other people around the bench. But I still would rather have him for the 55. Personally.
Okay, so you had Bundy Aki, who obviously we found out over the weekend had a very tumultuous tour. His wife gave birth on the route to the hospital in New Zealand to a baby girl, Anya. And I'm sure that was before the first test, I think. And he had that going on in the background. A crazy story. You look up some of the details, and it really is mad. But it's funny. I've been watching him getting real slated by the English press for how poor he was. I was reading 2 articles on the Telegraph where they were, like, ranking players and rating players of both in the third test and the tour generally, and it didn't chime with what I thought. Like, he was poor at the weekend for sure. One of his probably weaker games I've seen him play, but thought he was good in the second test. Thought he was pretty impactful in the first test.
I was surprised that maybe the two Pilato thing maybe played out as it did, like that it was so cut and dry.
Yeah,
Bundy was going to start. That did surprise me.
Jimmy Pilato played well in the first test.
I thought he was fine. Yeah, I thought he was good. I didn't think they really. I didn't think either of them really laid an unbelievable marker down. Like, I think people were expecting them to really go at Lina for, you know what I mean, to really, like, to make busting runs, to, you know, have kind of 5 and 10 metre kind of gain lines. We didn't probably see as much of that. And then obviously, you know, maybe he got slated because obviously he gets stepped for the right try and he gets stepped easily for the right try. But he's a big man. You know what he's like in the open spaces. You can even hear, I think Raj calls in commentary going, "Oh, the Lions are stuck here. The Aussies have won over." I think it's who goes through the gap? Sueli goes through, isn't it? And gives it to Wright to finish. Like I thought he could have done a little bit better on that one. He should have made him pass it out wide. I think they could have stopped it there, but he gets stepped badly on the inside, and once they're in there, it's over. And that to me is a big moment. Now they win the Test match, so who's someone saying to me, "Oh, did it really matter?" But when you don't get the other bit of Aki and you don't get as many kind of say, usually he's good for a turnover, kind of similar to Porter, like a something on the deck. Didn't get as much of that. Didn't look as strong there.
Centres never really came together. I don't think at any.
I think
Ringrose was obviously didn't get to play in the Test, but
I thought they messed them around a bit.
Yeah, it was it was always either or, and then mixing and matching, and then back to either or, and then back to mixing and matching, and then with Ringrose being ruled out. And I thought Hugh Jones,
he was okay.
He made some breaks, but I thought he didn't. He had some. I didn't think he finished as much as what he should have, maybe, or I don't think he linked as well as he maybe could have. But he is a very dynamic player.
He's good.
But never thought I thought the outside backs generally never really hit their straps across the tour. I thought
Freeman was bad. I thought Freeman's defence. I thought Freeman was a guy who was lucky to be.
Well, if Hansen was fit, I think he would have come in.
I think he would have. Yeah. Even that try, where Suey Lee sucks him in so easily. Like Gibson Park is definitely. I know Gibson Park's a smaller man, and you're probably not going to. You're thinking in your head, "Oh, I'm not going to leave him a 1-on-1 with Suey Lee here." But he bites in so early and so easy for that try. I was thinking, like, at least give him some indecision. Like, make him throw that pass late. He might throw a bad pass. He might throw something to the deck. He might throw it into touch. He might try a one-armed one because he thinks he's going to go. He's going to free his right hand to fend off Gibson Park because he thinks you're gone out. Do something. He basically he steps in so early. I thought that shouldn't have been a foregone conclusion of a try. And it was. I thought that was bad.
Yeah, I think.
And his defending throughout the three.
He was fortunate. I think I just think it was. Hansen, and even it's funny. Darcy Graham came on tour, started that First Nations Pacific game very well, and then got injured. If he hadn't got injured, I actually wouldn't have been shocked if Freeman was dropped for him, even as the tour went on, because I don't think he was playing his best. Jonathan, are you going to come in on something there?
Yeah, sorry, just whenever you were talking about the outside backs, I think it was just the legacy of the injuries, just sort of, as you said, I think Hansen would have started if he was fit. I think Aki came back in the second Test with the intention to play with Ringrose, and then Ringrose wasn't there, and I think that made things look very disjointed almost. And then again in the third Test, Tuipulotu's injured, so again you have the Aki-Jones combo that I don't think was the best centre partnership that Farrell had. I don't think Farrell ever indicated that he thought that was the best centre partnership he had, but the hand that he was dealt because of the injuries meant that they had to play. Yeah, I agree. Freeman didn't have a good tour, but you also have to think about Kinghorn coming in late. And
injured, yeah.
And injured. Hugo Keenan having the tour that he had. It just meant that it felt like none of the outside backs really ever got into a rhythm because everyone had their own issues on the tour with whether it be injuries or form.
Yeah, and I think they had a few moments though, and I thought Keenan, of all the back three, I think it's probably pretty harsh to lump Keenan in. I actually thought he was pretty good over the three tests. I think he had a very good test.
Yeah, I'd leave him out.
I think I would leave him out. I think he had a bad but we know why he had a bad kind of lead in. He was he was sick. So
Low was very mixed in.
Low was a bit, yeah. Like I think he still had a great that offload. Like he still has a few big moments here and there, But overall, whether he looked tired or he just didn't look as sharp. A few things didn't fall his weight. A few kicks that didn't kind of bounce right. And I don't think I think, do you know what is interesting from Jonathan's point, and it kind of just dawned on me there. I wonder, did they miss Ringrose a bit? I think if you think about how Ringrose defends, I think he takes a huge amount of pressure off Aki. I don't think Aki has as many lateral, he's not left on his own out there as much, because generally speaking, Ringrose has the guys organised and he's racing up to make someone make a decision. And I think that kind of simplifies things for particularly the outside backs, but also for his inside backs. Because either it cuts off a pass and someone has to dump something off short to someone that's generally covered, or they go over. It simplifies things a little bit if someone's coming up that hard. Now it makes it a very hard tackle for Gary, and I have my issues here and there with that type of defence, but that's neither here nor there. But I wonder, did Ringrose have a bit of an impact for all those guys just being out? So that is interesting. I did think Keenan was actually Keenan's ball handling, I thought, was excellent at times. I think they missed maybe getting the ball in his hands a little bit more. I didn't think you didn't see as much of him kind of releasing those guys with kind of a bit of time and space, which I think the Aussies actually did a little bit better, particularly over the second and third test. They just kind of get ball, but the second test mostly. They found those guys pre-contact a little bit more than the Lions did, I think, with open space, and got their guys a little bit of a chance to open up the legs. We're being picky. Like, the game was decided essentially with the kicking and the pack. Let's be honest.
Yeah, last player I want to bring up. We kind of run up against time wise. The other guys, James Ryan, who we discussed kind of at length after the second test, his impact obviously had a very bad injury at the weekend, which is awful to see. Ronan Gallagher, we kind of touched on him a bit as well. Matt Hansen, who's the injuries just really put paid to his ambitions. He'd actually played in 5 of the first 6 games, and then his foot injury meant he couldn't play in the test. You had Finlay Bealham, who was never really kind of a test in the test mix, and you had Jamie Osborne, Tom Clarkson being called up late. The other player though was Josh van der Fleer, who is probably leaving very deflated about how it all played out. Now, obviously, like Jonathan, open side was really competitive. You had Jack Morgan himself, Henry Pollock, Ben Earl can play there, and Tom Curry, who despite not playing well ended up getting the nod and really vindicating it. And it's funny, like he's Josh van der Fleer is so far and away Ireland's best number 7 as well. I was kind of like looking at that depth chart there. If he goes down and doesn't play against the All Blacks in Chicago, it's very hard to see who ends up playing there. It could be Caelan Doris like moving to number 7 and Jack Conan starting at 8. Like, there's no obvious like test match ready guy to go up against the All Blacks. That's kind of a side plot though to generally his tour though. What did you think about how it all petered out for him?
I think it was really interesting. It's really interesting, obviously, because of the Andy Farrell element to it. So you have his own national coach. We talk about how much Ireland rely on Josh moving forward, but also whenever we talk about Andy Farrell as a selector and how much stock he puts in test performances, there's an awful lot of how many times you've been to the well for him, I think. And I think he puts such value in, we see it with Tadhg Furlong as an example. Like, he put such value in the body of work that Tadhg Furlong had amassed at that level over a long period of time. But it didn't break that way with Josh van der Fleer. We're talking about somebody that not that long ago was, World Player of the Year. And I think it's maybe part of it was the squad selection in terms of not square pegs and round holes necessarily, but there was such a lack of number 8s that it meant everything was weighted towards number 7. There were so many open side options on tour, and he just sort of felt like the odd man out. Part of it felt like the game plan, part of it felt like the way that they wanted to play. They maybe went with the likes of Curry, who would be a different type of 7 to what Josh van der Fleer is. And it maybe just felt like, as good a player as he was, and it never felt like he was in bad form or anything. To me, it just was almost like a stylistic thing that Farrell wanted to go with in terms of the game plan. But I do think it's fascinating moving forward, because if it was any other coach from any other country, it would just be written off as, the fact of the matter is, we've seen it over so many Lions tours where, a coach just doesn't fancy a player, but we know how much Andy Farrell does like Josh van der Fleer, and that just makes it really interesting in terms of the dynamic moving forward. But again, what we do know about Josh van der Fleer is he's so professional, and he's so mild-mannered is probably the wrong way to put it, because you don't get to that level by being mild-mannered, but he's...
I think he is, Jonathan. I think you're 100% right. I don't think you need to water that down at all. I think he's a mild-mannered guy. He's a very humble guy. Obviously, he's a super competitor. You can be... I don't think those are mutually exclusive. I know, sorry to interrupt. I just think you're right. I think he is a mild-mannered guy. I think he'd be the easiest guy to drop.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I'm trying to say. It's... to me, if there was one player that it would not impact the relationship moving forward, it would be Josh van der Fleer, just because of the way that his character is.
He's a complete team guy. I reckon he's a real team man. Now, I'm sure he's gutted, but if you ask me about the different personalities, and if I was a coach going, oh my God, like, I'm going to be like Conan, I'd imagine is going to go, what, why aren't you picking me? I've done this and that. I could see that. I could see lots of other people. Like, imagine trying to drop, it's probably different for Farrell this time around, but imagine trying to drop Farrell for the English team. Like, I'm sure he's in your room going, well, like, I've done this. He'd have a great case. He'd have to really argue it out with him. But I could see Josh van der Fleer going, well, if that's what you think is best for the team, I could see him being that guy. And let's face it, like, I thought it was going to be closer between him and Morgan I thought that was going to be the shout because he's the Wales captain. He's been brilliant. Like as bad as Wales have been, Morgan has been brilliant. It's the Curry one that I didn't see coming, if I'm being completely honest. I just thought he would be on the bench, or I just didn't see that. Like I didn't see it ever like not being a shout to have Josh Van der Vliet on the team. That was definitely a surprise for me. And he actually did finish the season really well. I think he might have suffered from
tour as well.
He did have a good tour, and I think that was probably the surprising thing, is that Curry kind of was okay like at the start of it, and then he kind of looked when he found his way in the test match. And you could see how good he is. Like
so many options.
Yeah, and it was a very competitive. Like that of all the positions, that was the most competitive, and he's competing with the Wales captain, who the argument is it's easy to stand out in that Wales team. But he does stand out. Like Morgan does stand out every week. He pulls on that red jersey. And we just didn't see Curry being maybe an option because we don't see him every week, and he's not playing in an unbelievable team that's competing, all the time. And he's had lots of injuries, in terms of the England camp. So I think maybe on reflection, it was the most competitive place in the whole team.
Yeah.
That's maybe my read. Maybe bar Hooker, maybe bar Lucet, but there's only really 2 there, not 3.
Yeah. Well, I think there's not a topic we haven't touched on.
We tried to get through everything.
I think we tried to get through everything and give a snapshot of the last 6 weeks. Luke, Jonathan, thanks so much for joining me tonight, and for joining me throughout the course of the season. Show's going to go into a little bit of hibernation as I take some time off, but we will be back raring to go for season number 9, I think. Next year.
And honestly, so Jonathan, thanks so much. Who's obviously a regular contributor, and we really value your opinions, and I know the listeners feel the same way. But big thanks to all the listeners as always. It's amazing we've got this far.
Yeah,
you're still listening.
And so thanks so much for listening over the course of the year. We'll see you again soon.